stop conservative cuts and elect a progressive government that will stand up to Jason Kenney and Doug Ford and demonstrate that we will invest in our future together.
Minority governments in this country tend to last about 2 years. Some economists are predicting that given the chaos out there, we could well be in a recession in 2 years' time. Would it surely not be better to have a government you knew was going to be in place for 4 years, as opposed to one that might collapse at any point, perhaps during a crisis, as happened in 2008?
I think Canadians know how important this choice is. That's why we're working so hard to stop conservative cuts, to make life more affordable, to get guns off our streets, and to fight climate change right across the country.
Mr. Trudeau, good morning. Bruce Campion-Smith, the Toronto Star. Just wondering what your personal view is of minority governments. Do you see them as workable, productive, or unstable and unproductive?
Right now, Canadians are looking right across the country at the choice they're going to make on Monday. They're going to look their kids in the eye. They're going to think about the future that we're building together. And they're going to make a choice about what the coming years hold for Canada, for their communities, for their family, and for the world. And I know Canadians want a strong, progressive government that will stop conservative cuts, that will invest in the fight against climate change, that will get guns off our streets, and that will make life more affordable for families right across the country.
You didn't answer the question. I'm just wondering what your personal view of minority governments is when you look back at the track record over Canadian history.
When I look back at the last 4 years, we were able to bring in a national plan to fight climate change, and we pushed back against conservative premiers like Doug Ford and Jason Kenney, who didn't want to do anything to fight climate change. And that's exactly the kind of strong, progressive government we need to continue being in order to fight against climate change, to make life more affordable by investing in families, by getting guns off our streets instead of weakening gun control the way conservatives want to, and mostly a strong government that will stand strong against conservative cuts.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada.
Radio-Canada. I'd like you to answer my question specifically in a minority government scenario. That is credible. Now, in your opinion, what are the disadvantages of a minority government? Well, first of all, I want to say that I know the people here in Hamilton are very happy to hear a question in French, and I want to thank you for that. The reality is that we are focused on the choice facing Canadians. Right across the country, we're hearing this clearly. Canadians want a strong government that will stand up to conservatives, premiers or politicians who don't want to do anything to fight climate change, that want cuts and austerity rather than investments in making life more affordable for families, who want to weaken gun control rather than tightening it up. So that choice facing Canadians Monday can be summarized as, do they want a progressive opposition or do they want a strong progressive government? And I'm very confident that on Monday, Canadians and Quebecers will choose to have their hopes and values reflected in a strong, liberal, progressive government.
Vous allez en Alberta ce soir.
You will be going to Alberta tonight, and your candidate said that with C-69 there is very little choice that new pipelines will be built. Now, do you believe that he's right? And is that not a little hypocritical to be going to tell them you love them now Well, the fact is that Stephen Harper's approach failed. And it failed because Stephen Harper and the Conservatives did not understand, and they still don't understand, that the only way to build these big projects is to have the approval of the communities and to protect the environment at the same time and to work in partnership with the Indigenous peoples and to respect their views. The Conservative approach didn't work, and we have shown that we have a proper approach that works to both protect jobs and create economic growth and at the same time build a better future for all of us. You say that he says there won't be any projects. Well, I can tell you I'm very proud to have Stephen Guilbeault as part of our team. And the choice facing Canadians and Quebecers, particularly in Laurier-Sainte-Marie and other ridings, is: do we choose to go forward with a government with strong Quebecers like Stephen Guilbeault in that government who will fight climate change, just as he fought climate change throughout his life? Or will we be in the opposition and maybe have a strong voice, but not a voice that can be heard right across the country and around the world? We need a government filled with strong Quebecers like Stephen to deliver in this fight on climate change. And I'm very proud and happy to see that Quebecers are looking very positively on the election of a positive and progressive government as opposed to an opposition.
Stephen Harper's approach on pipelines did not work because he didn't understand that the only way to get projects built is to work to protect the environment at the same time, to work in partnership with communities, with Indigenous communities, and be responsible about how we move forward in social acceptability. That's why we put forward a new approach that combined environmental responsibility with a willingness to get big projects built, to work hand in hand with Indigenous peoples, because that's how we move forward in the 21st century. Stephen Harper got nothing built because he didn't understand that protecting the environment is an integral part of growing the economy. And now the choice is clear for Albertans, for Canadians right across the country. Do we continue to grow a strong economy with great jobs for our kids and grandkids while protecting the environment at the same time? Or do we go back to the failures of the Harper years?
Mr. Trudeau,
the possibility of a conservative minority government when it comes to climate change, he couldn't tear up the carbon tax because the fact is that Quebecers would not allow him to do that. Well, people like Jason Kenney and Blason Higgs and Andrew Scheer are all taking the government to court at this time in opposition to our plan to fight climate change. A government under Andrew Scheer would never fight to defend our pan-Canadian plan, would not defend the fight against climate change. That's very, very clear. And that's the choice facing Canadians and Quebecers and all Canadians. I want to talk now as a Quebecer directly to Quebecers. We recognize that Quebecers, like everyone, want a strong voice to represent them. But that voice has to be heard. It has to be able to change things. It has to be in the government. in order to ensure there's more action on climate change, and that we invest more in families, that we move forward to protect the rights of women, that we continue to protect minority francophone communities across the country, and that we invest to make life more affordable with better services for everyone. Quebecers, like all Canadians, are facing an important choice, and I can tell you that I am a proud Quebecer and a proud Canadian, and I'm proud to be able to reflect my values, our values within government and around the globe in order to represent the kind of future we want to build together. And that is what Quebecers want. They want their values to be reflected around the world, and for that we need a government full of strong Quebecers with progressive values that can reflect those values right across the country. Now you have talked a couple of times about the possibility of the Conservatives being elected. Now, did you talk about the possibility that on October 21st you would not be Prime Minister? Well, we know that Canadians are facing an important choice, and neither myself nor the Liberal Party is taking anything for granted. And that is why we are working very hard right across the country, and that's why I was so happy to have my children with me, by my side, to show that we're serious. We're serious in our desire to prevent those conservative cuts, and that we will always reflect progressive values that we so deeply believe in as a family and as a country, to defend the rights of women, to fight climate change, and to make life more affordable for Canadians, to get guns off our streets. That is our approach. We want to stop cuts and austerity, as we saw under the Conservatives. And those are the conversations I've had with my children, and we want to continue to work together as Canadians to build a better world for everyone.
Good morning, Joanna Smith with the Canadian Press. You have said there is no relationship more important to your government than the one between Canada and Indigenous peoples. And yet, your stump speeches do not mention First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. Last night at the rally, you described what a progressive government it is and what progressive issues are. And not once did you mention Indigenous issues. Not once did you mention fixing safe water drinking advisories. And I was listening for that last night. Why?
I have continued to talk about the investments we've made in Indigenous communities and relationship with Indigenous peoples throughout this campaign, and will continue to. We know how important it is to all Canadians that reconciliation, that economic opportunity advances, and we're very proud that the Grand Chief of the Assembly of National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Perry Bellegarde, has pointed out that no government in Canada's history has done more to invest and partner with Indigenous peoples than our government. But we also know there is much more to do. Yes, we have lifted 87 long-term boil water advisories, but there are more to do before we reach the deadline that we imposed ourselves, and we're going to meet that deadline. We're moving forward on historic agreements on self-government, on settling land claims, on investing in schools, investing in water, investing in health. We know that for all Canadians, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, making sure we are being the country we know we need to be, we know we want to be in our hearts, is what this election is also all about. And that's why that choice on Monday of going back to the broken relationships with Indigenous peoples of the Harper years, or continuing to move forward in investing in things like affordability, in safety, in education, in health, is the choice Canadians are facing, and why I am so looking forward to voting day on Monday.
That same national chief you just quoted also said he was very disappointed with your government's decision to ask for judicial review of the tribunal. You have said that you don't have time in an election campaign. That's one thing, but you did have time leading up to that. Looking back, is there anything that you feel your government could have done better to avoid reaching to the point where you feel it was necessary to ask for review?
We agree with the tribunal's decision that kids deserve compensation for the mistreatment they went through in child and family services. We absolutely agree, and we will be moving forward to compensate them. But more than just looking back, we've been focused on reforming child and family services to make sure that kids in care get to stay in Indigenous communities, in their language, get the support they need so they don't lose their culture and identity, which is so important to them. That's at the core of how we move forward as a country in partnership with Indigenous peoples. That's what we're going to continue doing, and that's one of the things that's at stake in the choice that Canadians are making on Monday. Do we continue to move forward on reconciliation, on making life more affordable, on getting guns off our streets, on fighting climate change, and do we stop conservative cuts? That's the choice on Monday.
Mr. Trudeau, Tom Parry with CBC News. You're setting off on a marathon campaign swing. Going to take you right across the country and back. This late in the campaign, should we look at this as an act of ambition on your part, or as an act of desperation?
This campaign is about getting out there and talking to as many Canadians as possible about the important choice they're facing. And there's many things that remind me of that 2015 campaign, including this last swing across the country where we get to talk to everyone about how important their choice is on Monday. Because it is a moment where Canada gets to determine what our future will look like. But not just in this election, our future for the next 4 years, our future for the next 40 years as well, because the fight against climate change needs action now. We've seen tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids in our streets over the course of this campaign saying to their leaders that we need more action on climate change, and we agree. And on Monday, right across the country, Canadians get to make a choice for their kids, for their grandkids, for making life more affordable, for keeping our communities safer by getting guns off the streets, and by fighting and stepping up in our fight against climate change. That's what we need a progressive government for. We're not going to go for the conservative cuts and the approach on climate change that does absolutely nothing and leaves it to future generations. On Monday, Canadians right across the country are going to choose forward.
En français.
Okay. Il y a le choix positif
The positive choice that Canadians are facing in this election does, in fact, look a little bit like the choice in 2015, where in the last days of the campaign we crisscrossed the country to get our positive message out and say that we needed a government that would invest in families, that would make life safer by taking guns off the streets, and that would fight climate change. And that is the message we are carrying right across the country now, that there is a very important choice in terms of wanting to continue by putting a stop to conservative cuts and reflecting our values and delivering a progressive government that will invest in families and fight climate change and take guns off our streets.
I know you're focused on forming a progressive government, but given your party's position in the polls, given the rise of the Bloc, given the rise of the NDP, how worried are you might be about to lose your job?
I am very excited and confident about the choice Canadians are making. And I know Canadians are right across the country, turning their minds to this election and specifically to the vote they have to cast, they get to cast on Monday. And the question they're facing is, with that vote, do we stop conservative cuts? Do we invest in our families and in our future and make life more affordable for them? Do we continue to strengthen gun control and get guns off our streets? And do we step up in the fight against climate change? And I feel great about the choice Canadians are making to keep moving our country forward.
Good morning, Michelle Zilio with the Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail reported yesterday that Warren Kinsella and his consulting firm worked on a secret campaign to, quote, seek and destroy the People's Party and keep Maxime Bernier out of the leaders' debates. A source with direct knowledge of the project said that the client was the Conservative Party. Mr. Kinsella has also come after you online, being a loud critic. Are you concerned the Tories also hired him to target you and discredit your party?
I think we've seen throughout this campaign that the Conservatives have had to use the politics of fear and division and indeed just make stuff up in order to try and get their message across. Why? It's because they have nothing to offer Canadians except $53 billion worth of cuts. The choice on Monday is so clear. We need to stop Conservative cuts. We need to invest in our future, invest in our kids by making life more affordable. We need to move forward on fighting climate change and getting guns off our streets. We need to continue the plan that has lifted 900,000 Canadians out of poverty and created over 1 million jobs, most of them full-time. That's the positive vision that we're putting forward as a Liberal Party of Canada. We'll let the Conservatives continue to scare, cut and divide.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
Okay. Nous reconnaissons que malheureusement les conservateurs
We know that
n'ont
unfortunately
aucune
the
autre
Conservatives
approche
have
que de
no
miser
other
sur la
approach
peur, la
than
division
to
et
rely on
d'inventer
fear
des
and
attaques,
division and simply
contre
make
leurs
things up
adversaires.
against their
Parce que tout ce
opponents.
qu'ils offrent, c'est des coupures
Because
et
the
de
only thing they're
l'austérité
offering
qui valent
are cuts and
53
austerity,
milliards de
$53
dollars.
billion
Ils veulent
worth
revenir en arrière
They want to
sur
go
la lutte,
backwards
pour le droit des femmes,
on
dans la
women's
lutte contre les
rights,
changements
on the
climatiques,
fight
dans
against
la
climate
protection des
change,
communautés LGBT.
on
Nous
protection of
savons que
LGBTQ
les Canadiens
communities.
d'un bout à
And we
l'autre de
know
ce
that
pays
Canadians
ne
right
veulent pas
across the
revenir
country
en
do
arrière,
not want to
que
go
nous voulons
backwards,
continuer
that
d'avancer avec
we
une
want to
vision
continue to go
forte,
forward with a strong and
progressiste, dans un
progressive vision
gouvernement
as part
ambitieux et
of an
progressiste,
ambitious
et
and
pas tout
progressive
simplement
government
dans une opposition
and not just a
progressiste. Ça
progressive
prend un
opposition.
gouvernement qui
What
porte
we
nos
need is a
valeurs
government
et
that
qui
reflects
continue à
our
lutter
values and
à tous les
continues to
jours
work
pour tous
every
les
single
Canadiens.
day for all Canadians.
Will you stay on as Liberal leader if your party loses the election and ends up in opposition?
I am focused on the Canadians I meet right across the country who are incredibly excited about the opportunity to continue the hard work we've done over the past 4 years that has lifted 900,000 people out of poverty, including 300,000 kids, and seen over 1 million new jobs created at the same time. Our approach to both fight climate change and build a stronger future with better jobs for our kids. Our approach on strengthening gun control, not weakening gun control like the Conservatives want to do, are the things that Canadians are going to vote on Monday. And from what the conversations I've had right across the country, Canadians are excited about continuing to move forward.
John Iverson, National Post. Following on the comments about your candidate's comments about C69, are you concerned that there's the potential for political and civil unrest in Alberta, maybe as soon as tonight when we arrive there?
We know that Albertans have faced difficult times over the past few years with oil prices, with challenges they face, and that's why as a government we've stepped up. We approved the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion and shovels are in the ground. We've invested in help for EI for Albertans. We've invested in many, many more infrastructure projects than the Conservatives under Stephen Harper ever did for Alberta. And we're doing that because, as we're reminded when we're in a fire hall, Canadians stand up for each other and are there to help each other in difficult times, and that's why all of Canada will always be there to support Albertans. We also recognize that Stephen Harper's approach didn't work. to help Albertans, and that's why we know that in Alberta and right across the country, people are serious about building a better future for their kids, and that includes a real plan to fight climate change and make life more affordable for Canadians, which is exactly what the Liberal plan does.
The public polling suggests that you've only got a 10% chance of forming a majority government. Do you still think that the path to majority is there?
I know that Canadians are focused on that positive choice they're making, and Canadians are looking at Monday, 2 days from now, as their opportunity to move Canada forward, to make a choice to stop conservative cuts, to fight climate change, to get guns off our streets, and to make life more affordable for all Canadians. And I can't wait to keep working with all Canadians on exactly that.
Kevin Winter, Hamilton Community News. I'm wondering, this is your third time in Hamilton. What is the strategy in Hamilton? Do you think is this Hamilton a bellwether for your government?
I'm incredibly happy at the positive response we've gotten right across the country from Canadians who know we need a strong government that reflects our values, that invests in Canadians, invests in making life more affordable for people, that gets guns off our streets, that fights climate change, and that stops conservative cuts. Sorry, just start it over again. I can't hear you. Yeah.
You talk about, there we go. You talked about getting guns off the streets, yet Hamilton had another shooting last night. How will that get guns off the streets?
We have moved forward with the strongest gun control proposals in Canada's history. Not only did we strengthen gun control significantly over the past 4 years, but we've put forward a plan that will ban military-style assault weapons right across the country, because there is no place in our communities or in our country for guns that are designed to kill the largest number of people in the shortest amount of time. On top of that, we are giving cities like Hamilton the opportunity to ban and limit handguns, because we know that protecting our kids, protecting our communities is a priority shared by Canadians right across the country. And the Conservatives want to weaken gun control. They want to make it easier to buy guns with less background checks, and they don't want to ban military-style assault weapons. That would be the wrong choice, and that's another reason why folks in Hamilton, folks right across the country, will choose Forward on Monday.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, when he ran for the leadership, promised that as a condition of a minority government, he would put electoral reform. That would be PR, proportional representation specifically. NDP members voted to ensure that proportional representation would be the condition in a minority government. Are you willing to revisit your stance on electoral reform and specifically enact proportional representation should you be in a minority situation?
Canadians across the country this weekend are focused on their vote on Monday, are looking forward for the opportunity to make a choice about how our country is going to move forward and what we're going to do for future generations. And that's why our plan is focused on stopping conservative cuts, on investing in affordability, on fighting climate change, and on getting guns off our streets. And that's what Canadians get to decide on Monday.
I know that you have a job to do in repeating your message. We have a job to do in asking you questions. Could you at least try to answer the question I'm trying to ask you? You said no to electoral reform. You argued that it was unstable. A proportional representation system would create a pizza parliament. You didn't want to work that way. Polling suggests that Canadians actually want to send a minority government to Ottawa, that they don't trust you, they don't trust Andrew Scheer. Do you regret your decision to nix electoral reform?
Canadians right now, this weekend, are reflecting on the choice they get to make on Monday. That's what Canadians are thinking about, from coast to coast to coast. Those are the conversations we're having about whether or not they're going to be able to afford to send their kids to university. And that's why we have a plan that's going to make sure that you don't have to start paying back your student loans until you're making $35,000 a year. This morning, I got to meet with seniors who were focused on being able to afford their medications. When they found out that we were going to be increasing old age security by 10% for seniors over 75, they were massively relieved, along with the fact that we're going to be moving towards implementing pharmacare. One of our candidates just yesterday heard from a dad in the riding who admitted to her that he has always voted Conservative all his life and was planning on doing that again, but decided that in this election, he was going to give his vote to his 13-year-old daughter because it was our future and her future that we were talking about. And he was going to vote for the only government that has had a real climate plan in the history of this country. He was going to vote Liberal for his 13-year-old daughter because of the fight against climate change. These are the conversations that Canadians are having this weekend. This is the choice Canadians face on Monday. Do we stop Conservative cuts? Do we invest in affordability for Canadians? Do we invest in the fight against climate change? And do we make our streets safer by strengthening gun control? Those are the conversations Canadians are having across the country, and that is the choice they're facing on Monday.
Last question. Good morning. This is a question for my colleagues at Power and Politics. Obviously, voter turnout was very important for you last time around. They want to know what your final pitch is to Canadians, first off, on why they should vote full stop, and second off, why they should vote for you.
I think this is an election that is more important than just the next 4 years. It will decide whether Canada continues to step up on the greatest challenge of our time, the fight against climate change. Andrew Scheer and his Conservatives have promised to rip up the only real plan to fight climate change that Canada has ever had as their first thing. And then they're going to offer 4 times as much cuts as Doug Ford has over the past years. We know that this choice is important, and Canadians right across the country need to make the right choice. They need to pick a progressive government that's going to make life more affordable for our seniors, for our young people, for students, for families. That's going to invest in small businesses and a brighter future. That's going to fight climate change, because you can't build a strong economy unless you are at the same time protecting the environment. Everyone knows that except the Conservatives. And it's going to strengthen gun control to make sure that more of our kids and families in our streets are safer at a time when the Conservatives want to loosen gun control and make it easier to buy guns. This choice in this election is, do we continue to move forward with a strong government that has demonstrated its ability to lift hundreds of thousands of people, including kids, out of poverty and create millions of jobs? Or do we move back to the failed policies of the Harper years? I am excited, and I've seen Canadians so excited about the possibility to come out and keep choosing forward as a country. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you all so much.